Hello, this is Dr. Alex G. I am so excited that Black Like Me is experiencing unprecedented popularity. Right now, our downloads are up 400%. That's crazy, just over it last month. And so I know that people are looking for a resource. They're looking to understand Black-white relationships and Black non-white relationships. And I'm so glad that they're finding it at Black Like Me. And so for those of you who have been listening for a while, I want to say thank you. I want to give a shout out to about 17 new patrons. Now, let me just tell you something. I've got to, like I did last time, I've got to push my longtime listeners just a little bit. I'm asking people as they come on as patrons, how long have you been listening? People have told me, I just listened for the first time today, and you said I should support, or I've just started listening yesterday. So please, if you've been listening for a while and you're enjoying the show, pause for just a moment, click the Patreon link, and support us at any level. It helps us to bring excellent programming to you that goes all around the world. All right, please do that. Another thing that you can do is write a review on how you're enjoying the podcast. That's really important. And you can subscribe. Please subscribe to the podcast, and you can subscribe on my website, alexg.com, so that if I put up any videos or any blogs, you get notices of that also. Now on to the fun part. I get to shout out 17 new patrons. This makes my day. I want to do a special shout out to Nikki Wagner, Sarah Leonards, Sarah Thames, sorry if I butchered that, Sarah, David Bass, Betsy and Scott Forrester, Lee Estes, Mary Ann D. Brow, Susan Akamoto Lane, that's a friend of mine from Seattle. Hey, Susan. Todd Bronner, Crystal Rezick, Winton Boyd, Christina Lundgren, Melody Hanson, a longtime friend, Darcy Weir, Kristen Leone, we went to high school together, Heidi Smith, and Karen Davidson. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's one thing to say that we have people who are listening. It's another thing for people to say, I'm going to support Black-led endeavors who are making a difference in the world. Now, today's episode is really exciting to me. And I'm talking with two gentlemen, Drs. Pinkett and Dr. Robinson. Now, the interesting thing about Dr. Pinkett is that he was the season 4 winner of The Apprentice. Yeah, he hung out with Trump. The Apprentice. Together, they've written a book that's called Black Faces in White Spaces. There's this thought, sort of mythological, that if you climb the corporate ranks, people don't see color. They just see you for your performance. I beg to differ. The more that we exhibit Black excellence, it becomes more of an affront to American or white American exceptionalism. So they've written a book for African Americans who have moved up the ladder, how to enter these spaces and not lose your soul. So this is so important because it gives you insight into why some of your managerial Black friends are still frustrated, because many of us have been taught, you've been taught, that people don't see color in the corporate world or the academic world. Bull crap, they do. So this episode addresses that. You're going to enjoy this one, and you need to share it with some friends, not just your Black friends. We already know. Share it with your friends who supervise Black people. Enjoy this episode of Black Like Me.
Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask could they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G, a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one Black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, good people. I want to welcome you back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. Now, each week I keep telling you all, my Black Like Me podcast family, that I'm working to just find tremendous stories of Black folks doing extraordinary things, and they're just taking it in stride because they're just extraordinary individuals. And so I love having these conversations with folks who are making changes in the world while also talking very honestly with me about how do we navigate white spaces as we become all of who we are. And it just makes for tremendous discussions. And so I just want to welcome just two brilliant thinkers, authors, academicians. So today my special guests are Dr. Randal Pinkett and Dr. Jeffrey Robinson. And they are the co-authors of the book. And I love this title, Black Faces in White Places, 10 Game-Changing Strategies to Achieve Success and Find Greatness. When I heard that title, I knew, okay, I want to have these gentlemen on. And so they have just an illustrious background. Dr. Pinkett has established himself as an entrepreneur, speaker, author, scholar, community servant. He has tremendous corporate experience as a member of the technical staff at General Electric, AT&T, Bell Laboratories, and Lucent Technologies. He's been featured on nationally televised programs such as The Today Show, Fox Business News, MSNBC News, and CNN, as well as Parade Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and he was a season 4 winner of NBC's hit reality show, The Apprentice. Yeah, The Apprentice. I got all kinds of questions about that. I might not even ask him, but I've got so many. This gentleman holds 5 academic degrees, everywhere from Rutgers to Oxford University. He's made history by becoming the first African-American ever to receive the Rhodes Scholarship Program at Rutgers University, which is now part of the Big Ten. I'm in Big Ten territory in Madison, Wisconsin. Equally illustrious is Dr. Jeffrey Robinson. Since 2008, he's been a leading faculty member of Rutgers Business School, where he's an associate professor of management and entrepreneurship and the academic director of the Center of Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. He has written books and contributed and articles on such topics as social entrepreneurship, African-American women in entrepreneurship, minority technology, entrepreneurship, and patterns of Black employment. And so we are going to have a powerful conversation today. We're going to have some fun and get just some real insight. Drs. Pinkett and Robinson, thank you so much for being my special guest on Black Like Me today.
Thanks for having us on the program. Excited for the conversation.
And the other thing that I think that has drawn us together is that we are all proud members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And
six?
Oh, 6. So we got a house full of alphas. So we can't
That's right.
Come on now. And special shout out to my friend Rebecca Novak, former member of Fountain of Life Church, who in Madison, who lives in Colorado, who dropped the name of Dr. Pinkett to me and said, you ought to reach out to this guy for your show. And my friend Doyle Sedell, who has been a big brother to me my whole life. Met him when I was a teenager in high school. And we remain friends to this day.
That's right. And
Gentlemen.
Rebecca works for our company, BCT. That's right.
That's right.
That's how I know Rebecca.
Yeah. So she still attends our church electronically on Sunday. So shout out there. Now, gentlemen, we have this fine tradition at Black Like Me podcast that I open up with Black icebreakers. And so I've got a couple of questions. And so Dr. Pinkett, since I met you first, I'll put you on the spot, sir. And listen, there are no losers here, but you can use Dr. Robinson as a lifeline. Now, you gentlemen are younger than me. I'm 56, so some of these are more age-based. So what I found is sometimes it resonates more with people, who are from my background. I mean, from my area group, But let me ask both of you this: growing up, your preference would it be grits or cream of wheat?
Oh,
you can answer
That's easy.
Grits. That's easy.
Let me see who the real alpha men are. Grits with butter and sugar or butter and salt?
Butter and salt. I'm a hardcore salt grit guy. That's like religion. I don't understand the sugar thing. I don't understand it.
You don't understand.
Dr. Robinson can jump in.
Definitely. How about that, Dr. Robinson? What would you say?
Oh, it's butter and salt. Not so much salt, but pepper. But you got to go with the savory, not the sugary.
I got you. No, I got you, gentlemen.
But I know some Midwest folk now that
that's right.
will swear by sugar.
That's right, because I was born in Chicago, so I bring up that. Gentlemen,
as was my wife. She's a Chicago South Sider.
So I'll go back and forth because this is gonna be fun. So, Dr. Robinson, when you grew up, did you receive what my friends call syllable spankings? And I know we call them different things, but do you have an idea of what I mean when I say syllable?
I got an idea of what you mean.
so can you just tell our listeners what you think a syllable spanking is?
When you're getting the spanking and you're getting a swap for each syllable.
Didn't I tell
I
you?
got a few of those. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Dr. Pinkett, growing up, did you, your family, or folks you know, did they put plastic on furniture in your house or in the house of a relative?
So, absolutely. And not only did I have a relative who had a house with plastic on the furniture, but here's the paradox. And those you can relate, somebody can relate. We still couldn't go in the room.
I know.
So what was the point of the plastic? What was the point?
That room, you call it like the front room. It was like a museum. You couldn't even go in it.
That's right.
I've never been in that room in my whole life. I've only seen it with my eyes.
Man, oh my goodness. When you all were growing, oh man, this is funny. Y'all, okay, let me pull up my list. Let me see. Growing up, do you remember whether or not your family or friends you knew or family members who used a little bit of Clorox in dishwashing?
Oh yeah,
in dishwashers. I mean, in the sink.
Yeah, that's right. A little bit of Clorox, just a capful of Clorox in with your dishes, just to make sure that you killed every little germ that was ever there.
Come on, I'm telling you, man. Every little germ, it will fix a lot of things.
It's like baking soda. Baking soda, same category.
Yeah, I got you, man.
Mm-hmm.
Did either of you grow up having to do Easter speeches at church?
Oh yeah. In fact, you know what? Pick your holiday: Easter, Christmas, Good Friday. I mean,
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I knew what a recital was. Probably by the age of 3.
Oh,
the word recital came out right around Mama.
They certainly. Wow, they certainly did that. Do you remember? There was in many of our communities there was a superstition around splitting the pole. Did you all grow up hearing about that? If you're walking down the street that's saying, you better not split the pole. I see you nodding, Dr.
Yeah. You especially you're holding hands with somebody or you walking in the group and there was a pole. It could be a pole, a fire hydrant, anything. Don't split the pole. Everybody got to go to one side or the other. Yes, man. Yes.
Man.
Yes. And I still don't know why.
I don't know why either.
48 years old.
Man. Dr. Robinson, where did you grow up? What in the South?
I grew up here in New Jersey as well. I was born in East Orange, New Jersey, and then we moved out to Parsippany. And then some of these things weren't in my neighborhood, but in my cousin's neighborhood or where my grandmother was. In summer times, you some things you learn
man,
just from hanging around.
Just a couple more of these. Now, this happened typically with older relatives. Did you have maybe an aunt or grandmother who would become very nervous during a thunderstorm, particularly if there's a lot of lightning and things? Do you remember some of the things that they would tell you that you needed to do or stop doing while the storm was going on?
You're right. It was the older relatives, but it was especially my relatives from the South. I remember the storm was coming, and she said, "Oh, get off the phone, get off the telephone. Nobody should be on the phone.
Off the phone.
When there's lightning."
Turn off the TV, turn off the radio. That's right. Because you don't want to get electrocuted.
Through the radio.
Was it?
Through
the telephone. Yep.
Man, some old folks would cover mirrors too. They would say, "Pull the radio down." I don't understand that.
That's
my
some old stuff.
Man, you all, I appreciate you all engaging. One, I love doing it because it's fun. The other thing is, I'm an enthusiast for African American history. One of my favorite academicians here at the University of Wisconsin, her name is Dr. Christy Clark-Bajara, teaches a class at our church for non-Black allies to understand U.S. Black history. So we teach a 9-week course using 4 university faculty, and it's phenomenal. We've taken 1,000 non-Black people through this class over the last few years. But she talks about the fact that Black people are not defeated because defeated people don't create culture. And the fact that you all are from the East Coast, I'm from the Midwest, and we can answer questions about, turning the radio off, turning the TV off, probably sitting still. Too. They didn't want you to be,
That's right.
want you to be still, too. Sit still.
That's right.
It just shows that even though we didn't have social media, we had these things that were very normative to us. We had ways of communicating and coping that we hold in common. Like we probably can all talk about plastic furniture or a cousin named Junebug that we realized wasn't our cousin until we got grown or we read his obituary. So I just appreciate that piece about our culture. And so thank you all for participating in this. You all, I've been anticipating, speaking of anticipation, I've been anticipating this interview because I love just talking with my family, brothers and sisters, about the incredible things that they are doing. And the purpose of the podcast is not to say, oh, can you believe that folks can read a book or write a book? Can you believe that these folks can become a Rhodes Scholar? It's to take our Black excellence all in stride because it's just how we've been trained to do it. But many of our listeners are non-Black, and they tune into this to understand a different side of reality as we're just talking about what life is like, what's important to us. And they're amazed from everything from the icebreakers to the great work that we do, but that we still have some general concerns about how we're perceived by the police or portrayed in the media. So I appreciate you both being here and just talking about your background and your story. Let's just jump right into this, to this book. I love, the title, Black Faces in White Places. 10 game-changing strategies to achieve success and find greatness. And I know that this grows out of your own experiences. So just tell me a little bit about how that collaborative effort, how it came. Well, no, I'm sorry. Let me just back up. Tell me how you two met each other, and then I want to ask you how the book came to be.
Yeah. So Jeffrey and I both attended Rutgers University. We both studied engineering at Rutgers. We both matriculated the same year. There's an organization at Rutgers, which is actually a chapter of a national organization, the National Society of Black Engineers. The Rutgers chapter held their initial meeting for the fall semester, first meeting. And by pure coincidence and serendipity, we sat next to each other at that meeting. Now, I remember he had on a jacket that said that had a cool jazz pin on it, and I call him Jazz. That's my nickname for Dr. Robinson is Jazz. And he turned to me and he said, "Hey, I'm Jeffrey Robinson from Parsippany," and that's how we met. Wow. It's an incredible story. You would think that we were born from the same womb, because I mean you cannot find anyone who I would consider to be more a brother to me than Jeffrey Robinson, and it's been a blessing to know him since that fateful day at Rutgers at that first semester when we met.
Man, that's great. And you still call him Jazz to this day.
I do. To this day. This day. Yeah, wow. Cool Jazz.
Fall of 1989. That's a long time ago now.
Man, that's fantastic. And so you both, have had, these illustrious careers in the academy, and you're writers, and you've had experience in corporate America as well. But something must have prompted the need to write what I'll call this bit of a guide or a handbook. And so, was it just a single event that made you just say, you know what, we got to write this book? Or was it just a culmination of all these things you learned by navigating these predominantly white spaces that made you say, we're going to put these things together in a book and give people these 10 pointers?
So there were a lot of things that prompted us to write the book. So certainly one was our personal experience. That's kind of where we started, thinking about our growing up in predominantly white environments. So for me, I came from East Orange, and then my parents moved out to Parsippany, which is only 15 miles away, but could be light years in terms of what the different communities were like. Right. In Randal's case, it was West Philadelphia to the East Windsor, Heightstown area of New Jersey. And we joke about it in the book, but in other settings, we say, for me, in my elementary school, there was me and there was Raheem. And both of us represented all Black people for the entire elementary school.
Wow.
And it was like that all the way through sixth grade. Middle school and high school were a little bit different, but it was still that experience of being the one or one of a few in predominantly white surroundings. So that was certainly one dimension of this. Then coming to college and being in a major like engineering, where once again we were one of a few in each of the classrooms, and you can kind of follow along through corporations and other experiences, and then into academia. We always had this experience of being one or one of a few in a space where it was predominantly white. And so people have always asked us questions, how do you succeed, what you do, how do you stay involved and relevant in the community, but yet you have this perspective or this background, what did you do? And so the book, second thing I would say is that the book came from people asking us the question, well, what helped you? What did you do? What are the tips that you might give other folks? And so that was the second reason why we wrote the book.
I'm sorry, please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I think the third thing I'd say is that we knew that there were other people who had similar experiences,
right?
People who had been successful. And so, in the final sort of version of the book, we decided we would also interview other people to find out what they saw as the things that made them successful. And those people's experiences also became part of, these 10 game-changing strategies.
Did you all know that as you were experiencing your own sense of isolation, that was really some form of research that would inform some of your life's work?
No. And we originally envisioned this project as being autobiographical, that we would simply tell our stories and not have it driven by strategies. Quite frankly, the publishing community was not enamored with that framing of the book. And when we got feedback from potential publishers, they said it'd be better if you made this more of a self-help than an autobiography, so that people can take the lessons, to your question. They can extract the lessons from the experience. And that's what prompted us to then invite other voices to be a part of the project by way of interviews. So no, I can speak, I think I speak for Jeffrey in saying I don't think we were that reflective or that visionary in thinking that our experiences would necessarily inform others. But when we came to the crossroads of deciding to write the book, we certainly were hoping that people could glean insights from our journey, that it would be easier for them than it was for us.
Sure. One of the things that I'm sure you all have faced, I'm curious to hear your take on this, but with some of our cross-cultural leadership development work that we're engaged in through my nonprofit, we're finding that leaders of predominantly white institutions think that once you reach a certain rank in the C-suites or vice president level, all of the different goes away. They don't think they understand the pressures mount as you ride that corporate or academic ladder, because there are always folks who are thinking, well, did you get into a Ph.D. program on some type of special affirmative action thing? Did you go to medical school because of some special allowance? And so it's just clear for us, I think, to unpack for the listeners who are non-Black, that just because we get a doctor in front of our name, letters behind our names, and a corner office, that does not mean that all of a sudden we are fully accepted and we don't have to worry about code switching or some of the more covert nuances of experiencing the darkening of that executive level. Am I true, or is that just what we experience here in Wisconsin, gentlemen?
No, it's true. And we got our own experience to validate that. And then again, we interviewed a bunch of people who could say the same exact thing. As you go up higher in the level, that doesn't disappear. And there are certainly challenges that Black executives and Black leaders face and crossing into these spaces where there aren't that many other people that look like them. And again, what do you do when that's the case? And how do you get there? How do you stay there? Those are critical questions.
Man.
Yeah. And I'll just preview this to say, we're actually right now in the process of working on the next book, which is Black faces in high places. and it really dovetails off your question. The first book is really how do you get to the top? The second book is how do you stay at the top? That there's a different set of challenges.
Come on.
Once the all eyes are on you and you're in the spotlight and you're quote unquote kind of in charge or at the top of your game, it's a whole new set of challenges that arise, and we're trying to now understand what are those dynamics that we can offer insights in that context.
That's very helpful. It's very helpful because I think that's an area that people have misunderstood. They just assume that when you get to a certain level, we don't have to worry about these kinds of things anymore. And I'm also finding that leadership, like the CEO, can buy into a certain concept or belief in the importance of diversity, but that doesn't mean that his or her inner circle believes that as well. So you have people that are saying, this is a true value of our organization. This is the right thing to do, right. And they're assuming that all the chief marketing, chief financial, COO, all these folks are getting it. They're still sitting there trying to figure out, how did you get here, and how'd you get here faster than we did, and we're threatened by you. That it creates this whole nother level of tension. I think it's brilliant for you all to be thinking about how do you stay there, because it's rarely the work. As I talk to folks, just as a pastor, I've been pastor for 35 years. So I sit down and talk to friends about what's a struggle for them in those key places. It's not that the work is so overtaxing that they just can't catch their breath. It's the sabotage. It's being left out of certain meetings or certain things like that. And we still survive, but it's the game playing in those places, and it's rarely the level of work. You don't get to that level because you're lazy.
Mm-hmm. And you'll know that the Black faces in white places, playing off your language, is based on 4 parts. Part 1 is learn the game. Part 2 is play the game. Part 3 is master the game. And part 4 is redefine the game, which suggests that, and we say this in the book, that there's 2 competitions taking place with 2 different sets of rules. There's the competition for Blacks and minorities that have their rules, and then there's the competition for whites that has their rules. And there are 2 separate competitions with 2 separate rules. Wow. And there are differential consequences for differential actions. That what I do, if I fail, it has certain consequences. If a white person fails, it's a different set of consequences. Right. They may have more latitude. They may have more consideration. They may say, oh, they had a bad day. If I fail, oh, who hired him? Who brought him into the organization? So once you understand that there are competitions with different rules, you can begin to understand what are the rules that apply to you in your industry at your level, that you can then learn, play, master those rules. And then when you get to a certain level, get to the top where you're in a position to make change, now you can redefine those rules to make it better for everybody else.
I love it. And to add to your point, Dr. Pinkett, our white counterparts have latitude, because if Sandy or if Mike mess up, it's not attributed to their whole racial group.
Right.
Come and mess up. You have a bad day. Not only will it influence so many things for folks that work around you, it will cloud the next hire that looks nothing like you, but a lot like you because they're Black. And we carry that burden too. So back to like what Dr. Robinson was saying about being one of 2 Black students in the school, there's a certain weight that you carry because you understand your actions speak more loudly than just what you are doing. You're not just representing your family. Black executives, professionals, we go to work understanding we must be on the top of our game for the person who will come behind us, because we are not just guessing. We know it can and will be used against them.
Absolutely right. And so your part of it is trying to figure out how to deal with that, that some of the people call it the dual tournament that's going on at the same time, where you're going through the same experiences, but it's a different set of criteria. Mm-hmm. And then it's also trying to better navigate those spaces in order to figure out how you can make contributions back to your community, or redefine the game for those coming behind you. Sure. Because if that's the case, if that's the reality right now, well, again, how do you deal with it? What do you do? And that's where we thought it would be better to focus on strategies that will help people to navigate those situations than just to talk about the problem. So we took one chapter to talk about the problems, and then we decided to write 10 chapters that dealt with how to solve those problems.
You know, gentlemen, I think I understand learning the game, mastering the game, and redefining it. I would love for you just to expound a little bit on playing the game.
Oh, absolutely. So the section on playing the game is all about relationships, And one of the most common points of feedback we've gotten on the book from Black people is the following statement: "I don't like to play the game."
Yes.
You know, and we heard that a lot, which was, it may not have been surprising to Dr. Robinson. It was actually surprising to me that so many people tried to remove themselves from the politics and the personalities and the nuances of how they navigate relationships, not recognizing, and we see this in the book, that if you don't play the game is going to play you. Meaning that everyone else is out there networking after hours and having personal conversations in the office about, you know, how to advertise their accomplishments and how to, you know, figure out ways of navigating the workplace, recognizing that it's not what you know, oftentimes it's who you know.
Right.
And so playing the game in the book is about 3 kinds of relationships, which is strategies 4, 5, and 6. Strategy 4 is diverse and solid relationships, having really close ties with diverse people. Strategy 5 is about what we call developmental relationships. And that means mentoring, sponsorship, somebody who can teach you and guide you and to help you to develop. And then the 4th kind is what we call group relationships, where you're talking about finding strength in numbers. What are the organizations you join? What are the inner circles that you form, the mastermind groups, the book clubs, the dinner meeting connections that you make? Like, what are the small and large groups, formally and informally, that you're a part of that can pour into you and also expand your network of relationships? So it's those interpersonal relationships, those developmental relationships, and then those group relationships that help you to better navigate relationships and better play the game.
Man, that's helpful and really insightful.
Hey everybody, this is Tyler, the podcast manager of Black Like Me. Just wanted to jump on and share 2 quick things about Black Like Me. Number 1, Patreon. Patreon is an opportunity for you, if you like our show at all, if you enjoy it, if you want us to keep creating this content, to be able to support us financially and to help us do that. For as little as $2 a month, you can join our team. We also have some other higher tiers with some more benefits if you join. So please go to patreon.com/blacklikeme to hear more. Number 2 is that if you are interested in having Dr. G speak, if you're interested in him doing some consulting for you, your organization, anything like that, you can go to alexg.com/contact and you can fill out a form to be able to see how you might be able to bring Dr. G to your business or your community. All right, back to the show.
I'm curious, from your perspective, from your research, is would you say it is more difficult, just as difficult, easier for Black faces in white places today than, say, maybe for Blacks in corporate spaces during your parents' time, during their career time?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Either the challenge for our parents' generation was there were so few that and you know, and in some places there was still segregation by law, that some of the issues we're talking about weren't as relevant.
Okay.
And so just to give you two examples there. So our communities were structured differently. And we had, you know, the residential segregation put us in a community where we had a Black lawyer and a Black doctor, and the stores were Black, and et cetera. And so, you know, it wasn't the same dynamic. Cross into the 60s and towards the late and the 60s, the laws changed, allowed us to have opportunities to move and to live in other different places. And so that's where the dynamic we're talking about starts to
Right.
become the phenomenon. Now you are a Black person who's has a certain amount of means. You've moved to a different community, and now you're the only one. And maybe people are trying to keep you from living there. You know, we interviewed Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker, who, you know, tells a story about his parents moving into a community, trying to move into a community in northern New Jersey that did not want them, and all the things they had to go through in order to do that. So now your children are the only ones in school, and now we start to see some of the things that we're talking about in the book. So I don't know if I compare easier or harder or what have you. I think they were different circumstances. So, you know, that's 60s into the 70s. Now we're talking about 90s into the 2000s.
Right.
And you know, again, we're in a different dynamic now. And there's been 30 years, 40 years that's passed. And some of the things that were promised and some of the things we expected as a community have not happened. While there may be great laws on the books that say, you know, you have these civil rights, what about economically? What about financially? What about the other ways that things are influenced in this country in particular? How do we have influence there? And that's why, you know, it's a different dynamic that we try to address. What do you do and how do you address it when you start getting into these different professional situations?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Have you gotten pushback from, say, white colleagues or white corporate leaders who say, come on, you guys, it's 2020. Do you really need a guide for how to navigate these organizations? We've got Oprah, Michael Jordan. Come on, it's a different America. Come on, we're all the same. We're absolutely, you know, we're absolutely the same. Are you hearing that, or have you heard that as you've written your book about how to navigate spaces that they not dominate?
I heard that sentiment quite prominently after the election of Barack Obama as president. That there was
I did too.
I mean, and across the 8 years, there was a spoken or unspoken sentiment that, well, if you got a Black president, then there should be there are no more barriers. We're in this post-racial society, and we talk about this in the book.
Sure.
That post-racial is first of all is a myth. That we're not in a post-racial society, and that in the book we argue what we're really seeking is not post-racial, but post-racism,
right?
And that we certainly are not there. And so, yes, we've heard that sentiment, and it was a wake-up call at the end of the Obama administration with what we saw with the subsequent election and what unearthed of tremendous proportions of what that unearthed in terms of what had been a series of sentiments that had been brewing over those 8 years, not only as related to African Americans, but also Muslims, immigrants. The list goes on of others that were vilified as a function of a Black man rising to become president, and that sowing the seeds of antagonism as a result of that.
Man, I definitely hear you on that, and I think much of what we're experiencing was actually the backlash of President Barack Obama and just seeing that level of success. So it's interesting. There's some folks in the dominant culture who will point to that and say, see, there are no barriers, but then there's tremendous backlash against that kind of success. Some of the work that we're engaged in here in Madison in terms of race relations, similar to what you all are doing. We're a small percentage of the state's population, meaning Black people are about 6% of the state's population, but probably close to 50% of the state's prison population. And other places where we're finding just great disparities, tremendous disparities. And we're also learning that some of the stress of navigating the space of like what Dr. Robinson talked about, being one of two Black students, or being the only Black person, one of few people of color in certain corporate circles, it brings a level of stress. And some of the work that we're doing is showing the impact on Black health, that the stress from being in constant isolation, constantly code switching, going to work, and maybe I'm navigating my space today, but my wife is across town at some insurance company, and they're giving her to run around. And then my baby is telling me that the teacher's not calling on her in her AP Spanish class when she raises her hand. And then you got to try to find a place for your parents for long-term care, and there's no one who looks like them inside the facilities. And it's the management and maybe the non-management of that stress that has become a social determinant of health. And so I don't know if you addressed that in your book. I've ordered my copy because I want to get one. So my team has ordered it for me. I haven't gotten my copy yet. But our end of the work allows us to work with mainly with white folks who want to be allies, and understanding that this isn't just about fairness, but we have now assigned a health component, a health factor in all of this, that this stress that our folks used to say, this just makes me sick and tired. It definitely has made us sick and tired. It has an impact on Black life expectancy. And so I'm wondering, do you all talk about any of that aspect of this as well, like the aggregate impact of all of this stress in being upwardly mobile and highly visible in these white spaces?
So frankly, it wasn't something that we talked about in the first book. I think it's something we're going to be addressing in the second book as we're in the process of writing it now. It is absolutely an issue for the entire Black community, because if you think about this in terms of progressing up the ladder, it's great that you get to the top of the ladder, but if you have a heart attack and die 2 years later, what good are you?
Right.
So
that shouldn't cost that. Success shouldn't cost us that.
Right. And so it's certainly something we talk. And then in talking about it in terms of the current pandemic situation, we see all of these disparities. We certainly know people who are trying to address this from a systemic or an institutional perspective, and that those are some of the game changers that we think about.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about this as I looked at your background, Dr. Robinson. I'm appreciating the increased dialogue around social innovation and entrepreneurship among African Americans, because it seems like for so long we just talked about jobs, access, and being able to make livable wages. However, even when we were farmers or lived in a more agricultural reality, it was still somewhat entrepreneurial, because you live by your own individual activities, planting, and then being able to trade and barter or sell. There was more of an entrepreneurial spirit. I think as we've gotten more involved in corporate America and academia, I think we've gotten away from entrepreneurship. And so do you see or sense a rise in interest in Black entrepreneurship? And if so, is it with my generation, mid-50s, maybe a little bit more disposable income, or are you seeing it maybe my daughter's generation, first year grad student, 23, 25-year-olds? Who in the Black community is leaning more towards really thinking about social innovation and their own entrepreneurship, not as a hobby, but perhaps as a way of living?
Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, farmers were certainly the first entrepreneurs that we could document, thinking about people who are running their own farms. So the other part of this is a generational shift. We did a lot of work in the 60s to get access to the corporations. And so during the 70s and 80s, the corporations and government, we as a community made a lot of forays and got into the companies that we wanted to get into. And those were, quote unquote, the good jobs.
Right.
But what happened?
Government jobs.
That's right, government jobs. But what happened in the 80s into the 90s is that a lot of those good jobs, government jobs, corporate jobs, they started to do layoffs. They started to close down companies and send those jobs outside the country. And so the children of those folks said, well, I guess that's not an option for me. Not at least not in the same way it was for my parents, where I'm going to go and work somewhere for 30, 40 years and get a pension. So what are my options? And so people started to think about it. I think at the same time, in the Black community, rise of hip hop. And if you think about some of the themes in hip hop, it is about having your own money and making your own way. And a lot of young entrepreneurs came out of that time, or a lot of people talking about entrepreneurship. And this is where the disconnect is, that generation, that younger generation came through with the idea, I want to work for myself, but it didn't translate into creating your own companies all the time. And that became the disconnect. We got a lot of people saying, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to run my own business, but then not being able to do it for all kinds of reasons, sometimes financial, sometimes not having the training to do it, not having access to those things. So now the generation that's in colleges right now, they've seen all of that. But now they are a lot more innovative, a lot more tools in their toolkit to be able to start things and do things. And so I find this generation that I teach and at the university level, they are so much about being their own boss. I see so many people, more than I've ever seen before, but then actually having the tools to do something about it. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of new approaches. A lot of people thinking it's not just about going and working for somebody else. What can I do to work for myself?
No, that's really good. And I hope we put some of that entrepreneurial training in places outside of business school. I was a pre-business major. I started college in 81. I went to Wisconsin. And so I was a pre-business major until that first accounting 200 exam. I promise you that sucker has 13 pages. Somebody just got up and ran out of the lecture crying, and I almost followed them. I almost followed them about that lecture. I could not fathom all of that stuff. And so I ended up being an econ major, which was at the College of Letters and Science. And so please, whatever influence you have among business school faculty, please please take some of the entrepreneurial training to Letters and Sciences or Consumer Science School or something like that, because I was a paper boy. I was very entrepreneurial, but I couldn't hack, couldn't make business school. So please, for the sake of those of us who are sharp, but we just can't do accounting, help us out, brother. Help us out.
We're there.
Dr. Pinkett, I know that you've been really gracious with your time, and you have another appointment you've got to get to. I find that when it comes to the kind of training that we're talking about, of making more diverse environments, people want to check it off and say it's sort of a one and done. What do you say to folks who are part of corporate structures who are listening to this, who want to use your book as a resource, who think that with one training they're done? What do you say to people to encourage them to stay the course?
I would say simply that change does not happen overnight, and creating a more diverse and inclusive organization is a journey. It's not a destination. And it begins with a personal journey that aggregates up from individual to individual to individual to become an organizational reality. We talk a lot about D&I, diversity and inclusion. We also talk about embedding D&I into your DNA, making it within the fabric of you as a person and within the fabric of your organization as well. And like any transformation, it requires not just leadership, but it requires commitment. It requires reinforcement. It requires really having the determination to say we're going to continue to make ourselves better. To that point, 2 years ago, Dr. Robinson and I partnered with the Omaha Empowerment Network to launch an institute based around the book. Getting back to our earlier conversation, it's called the Redefine the Game Institute. That's what it's called.
I like that.
And it's a year-long initiative where we bring leaders of African-American leaders in for a 12-month journey for how they can learn and apply these principles back within their organizations. And so we recognize, like your question implies, that if you want to make a difference in moving the needle on these conversations, first of all, get the book, but know that the book is only there to catalyze a journey for you personally and organizationally.
That's great. That's great. I know you've got to get to your next meeting, sir, but thank you so much for this time. I'm just going to wrap up with Dr. Robinson, but thank you. If you have 30 more seconds, what's the best lesson you learned from being on The Apprentice? My listeners would be mad at me if I didn't ask that, but I don't want to build the interview around it, but just one of the best teachable moments or lessons you learned by being season 4 winner.
Yeah, two things I took away from the experience. One, that I can say very quickly, and one I can speak a little more to, one of the things but my biggest lessons learned was I learned a lot over the year as the apprentice of what not to do. That's one of the things I learned. I learned a lot. I learned that there are different models and styles of leadership. My philosophy is that we can all win together. That more for me is not less for you.
Sure.
We can make the pie bigger. There are those who I experienced in my apprenticeship who believe it's a zero-sum game. That for me to win, somebody has to lose. More for me has to mean less for somebody else. And I learned over the course of that year that I have to ground myself into a set of principles in business that reflect my value system as a Christian and reflect my value system as an African American, and that I can't assume everyone subscribes to the same model. The second thing I learned, which I can talk a little bit more about, is, I was 15 years younger when I did the show, and I almost tacitly assumed that if you've made lots of money, you did it the right way. And that's a piggyback off my last point.
Right.
So I came in kind of wide-eyed open saying, what can I learn about running a multi-billion-dollar organization, only to realize that much of the fundamentals of what it takes to run a multi-billion-dollar company, we were already applying at our multi-million-dollar company. And so it elevated my sense of what I can accomplish, meaning, I'll put it very pedestrianly. Is this what it takes to run a billion-dollar company? I can do this. I can do this.
Wow.
So let's raise the bar in terms of what we aspire to do. And now, BCT Partners, the firm that we founded, is on the Black Enterprise 100 of the largest Black-owned businesses in the country. We're number 92, and we're climbing.
Yes.
But we just hit that list last year, and I believe that part of what we have done is really elevate our vision for what we can accomplish. Not just me, but also Jeffrey and Dallas and Lawrence, our business partners.
Man, I love it. I love it. You've been gracious with your time. I'm going to close out with Dr. Robinson. Maybe one more question.
All right.
But thank you so much, Dr. Pinkett. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Fred.
Man.
God bless you.
And we're putting a link in here for our partners to be able to purchase your book and to also to know how to get in touch with BCT Partners.
Awesome. God bless you.
Thank you for that. God bless you.
Okay.
Dr. Robinson, both the corporate world and the academic world are, just predominantly white. Have you found that what's needed for safe navigation in the corporate world very different than the mindset of what people need, faculty seeking tenure, et cetera, in an academic setting? Are they similar? Are they different? So as you both approach your strategies, where do you come together, and where do you say, nah, man, in the academy, it's different?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of similarities. In fact, I find that people who have some business experience and then go into academia can fare better than those who've just taken the academic route all the way. And I'll tell you why I say that. It's the playing the game part. It's the politics. It's understanding you got to have a network. That just because you see, an organization chart doesn't mean that organization chart is how things get done. It could often be about the people and the relationships. And what I find sometimes for academic people is they think that all I need to do is be the smartest in the room and I will be fine and everything will be fine. And the reality is it's not just your skills. In terms of what you're able to do from an academic perspective, it's also the people you know and what relationships you developed and the mentors that you have and having mentors and what that means. So it's a lot of similarity. A lot of folks who do not think that that they need to play the game, that they need to understand who's in the room and do some self-management and be able to act a certain way. These are things that happen in any large organization or institution. And so there's a lot of similarities between corporations and academia.
Sure. Do you feel that people in corporate America, African Americans who are rising to critical levels of power, are as prone to be relegated to minority specialist roles compared to those in the academy. Again, I worked, before starting my nonprofit, I was always a bivocational pastor. So I worked at the University of Wisconsin before I went to grad school. So I was working basically in student services. I was a minority affairs director in the pharmacy school. I was a special assistant to the chancellor for minority community relations. I was hired when Donna Shalala was our chancellor before working in the Clinton administration. And she created the Madison Plan that hired folks like me, recent grads, to work as a recruiter. So I absolutely love working in the academy. But most of my friends who are academic staff were minority service personnel. So when it came time to apply for jobs like an assistant dean, people felt we didn't have enough experience with white students because we wanted to work with our people, but that's where they saw us. Now, this could be just a misnomer, but when I think about people in the corporate world, they can become a corporate attorney, they can become a CFO, COO, but they're not necessarily the CFO of Black issues or the COO of Black operations. So I'm curious if you think we're pigeonholed more in the academy than we are in corporate America.
That's again another great question. You're hitting all the good ones today. I think you're onto something there. There's certain pathways, career paths inside academia, and what I find interesting, again, comparing it to the corporation, is that some of this pigeonholing takes place in corporations. And for example, it's very rare that you're going to find somebody who comes through the HR function end up being a CEO, right? Where do they usually come from? They come through finance, they come through operations, they come through the research side, and then they make their way into other parts of the company. And so we tell people that they got to watch out for that pigeonhole. So on the academic side of things, there's a certain path, the student services, into vice president or vice chancellor, for diversity or student affairs or something along those lines. And so the question you got to ask yourself is, do those people become president of the university? And they tend not to. They tend not to. And so it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. So what we tell people is, if your goal is to be president, you need to talk to some other presidents. You need to talk to somebody to be your mentor, and they will probably tell you where do people get their next president for a university or a chancellor. They get it through this path, and you need to watch that path. I think the pigeonholing can happen in lots of different fields, but I see it a whole lot inside of academia. And so you're absolutely onto something we'll be talking about in our next book.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. And just who inspired you in your academic as a child? Was it your parents? Was it I'm just curious about who really inspired you to begin to think, you know what, I might be an academician.
Well, it's interesting. It's not somebody in my family, because that wasn't our family history. I was in my household, I was the first one to go to college. I had one aunt who went to the college, but other than that, my goal at first was just to get a degree, get a good job.
Right.
But there were a couple of instances where people said, well, what about graduate school? What about PhDs? There was a gentleman named Dr. Howard Adams, who went around talking to engineering students, basically from campus to campus, talking to minorities in engineering and saying, hey, what about graduate school? And he had a fellowship program called the GEM Fellowship, which funded me and others to do graduate school work. And then there's another initiative called the Ph.D. Project, which is specifically looking for people who were in business, who had technical degrees, who were interested in, had some modest interest in pursuing an academic career. They had a initiative to show people this is what it's all about, and inspired us to think about this is a potential career. And so for me, it was people who came through that initiative, the Ph.D. Project, Professor D.T. Ogilvy, and a bunch of other folks who I met and said, well, if they could do it and they're happy with their career and they see these things as a way to give back to the community, then why not for me? There's a certain autonomy, and it gives you a platform to do some of the things I've always wanted to do. So let's go for it. But you can't be what you don't see. And I think And those two different initiatives, one that was more STEM focused and one that was business focused, they showed me exemplars, people who have done it. And I said, well, again, if they can do it, I can do it too.
Man, that is really great. Dr. Robinson, I really appreciate your time. As I mentioned, I've been looking forward to this interview, and I just think it's great to have folks who have technical backgrounds but work in the academy, and then you're also writers. I love the way you just traverse the disciplines to create this new norm. And I'm inspired, man. I'm inspired, and I laud you all in your work. But staying in high places, I might be getting the title wrong, but that focus of how do you stay in those high places, man, I think is already a hit, because that's so needed. So man, I appreciate your work. I appreciate your time and coming in and let me ask you these questions, for putting up with my Black icebreakers, because that's always fun to kind of connect us. And so just thank you for your time. I'm going to have you hang around for just a minute more after we finish up. But you all, our guests have been Dr. Randal Pinkett and Dr. Jeffrey Robinson, who have just been great leaders and influencers. They are the co-authors of Black Faces in White Places, 10 game-changing strategies to achieve success and find greatness. And listen, they're not satisfied. They're continuing to push for greatness as they're already working on their next book. And so listen, Black Like Me family, listen in closely. Those of you who are involved in diversity initiatives inside your organizations, contact them. Contact my team about work that we're doing or we can do. Get their book and to understand what they're saying to other people of color about dealing with you. It's important you have a chance to read their book to find out what people are thinking about or having to deal with in the environment. And I think that this could be a great, great tool for you. So as always, folks, we ask you to lean in, to listen, to allow yourself to be changed, and then share this information. As always, we want you to subscribe, because you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like what we're doing, click in our link below, go to our Patreon page. We're getting new Patreons on the regular, and we're shouting their names out. There's certain folks at a certain level that I will do I don't say Facebook, Zoom gatherings with them, so I can just give them some of the behind stories of what we're doing and what goes into making this podcast. So come closer, lean in, and help us to continue to put this good message, this informative message, out into the universe. So go and have a great day, and thank you so much for being a part of Black Like Me.
Ooh, Black Like Me, yeah.
I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Ooh, Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.